go ahead and get started with the first item on tonight's work session agenda, which will be a discussion centering on the K1 Center assessment. Mr. Johnson?
Yes, sir. Council President and members of the council, we have Thompson Engineering and folks from their watermark design. They're going to come forward and present you their findings. So I'll invite them forward now. Have a seat. Talk from the microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, council members, City of Fairhope. Glad to be here tonight and to report to you the findings that we have for the K1 Center report. My name is Nick Gray. I'm with Watermark Design Group. We're the architects on the project. I've got Bryce Moore here from Thompson Engineering. He's our building envelope specialist, and he'll be reporting on some of the building envelope, minor structural analysis, and some of the environmental portions of the report as well. And then Wade Stewart on the end there from Stewart Engineering. He'll also be reporting on the MEP sections of the report. Just to kind of give you guys a little bit of recap, our team responded to the RFP with the understanding and determination that we were going to investigate the existing K1 Center and try to assess and evaluate the various components with a broad spectrum in mind, providing you with a report with as much detail on architectural, minor structural, MEP, environmental, and site-related details as possible. So if you'll take a look at the report that we provided to you, it's rather lengthy, but we hope that it gives you a good summary of the property that you purchased and the buildings that are on there, as well as some of the components within that. Overall, just to kind of give you a heads up on some of the details, you've got a main ground floor of the main structure is 27,000 square foot facility existing. There's a basement level, which is approximately 12,800 square foot, which is a total of 39,800 square foot within that main facility. You have two classroom wings. That's the two that are outboard that have the breezeway between those. They're roughly 2,200 square foot each. And then you have an office annex that's about 1,500 square feet. So overall on the complex, not including the Pelicans, that's right, you have 45,700 square foot of usable space. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bryce. He's going to start talking about some of the items that we first found whenever we boots to the ground running.
All right, thank you. Bryce Moore, supervisor of the Building Envelope Services Group from Thompson Engineering. Our group assesses waterproofing components, roofs, exterior walls, windows, and through-wall penetrations. I am also a certified nighttime lead paint gauge operator, so we also performed the lead-based paint analysis, and we subcontracted the asbestos. Our assessment began in the attic, so I'll start with the structural. We took a look at the structural in the attic to assure that we had good footing in place before we assessed the roof. Lumber in the attic were observed to be in very good condition. There was one run in the south wing beneath the shingle to low slope roof abutments. Probably 20 to 30 structural truss members were moisture damaged. If you'd like to go to page 80, you can get an idea of what that damage looked like. It was isolated due to that abutment of the low slope and shingle roof area. This run of trusses was the only lumber structural components that we found to have any observed damage, whether by moisture or any other cause, and no other degraded structural items were found. We decided that this was caused directly by the roof leak above it. The north classroom buildings and their walkway covers, they have no attic spaces, and the roof deck on all of those is a cementitious wood fiber. The cementitious wood fiber does not handle moisture very well. There were some areas of the low slope mod bit roof on those roofs that had poor adhesion and impact damages from the trees above, and there were leaking areas in those tectum decks. The tectum decks are held with a metal framework, and we did find some corrosion in those frameworks. So the classrooms and office to the north will need a full tectum deck inspection after the roof material has been removed. All the structural piers that were beneath the building in the lowest levels that we could observe and that we could get to, mostly in the south wing and the gymnasium area, which are photographed in pages 75 and 81. All of the south wing and gymnasium piers and joists were found to be in very good condition. There was no deterioration that we could locate. The north wing was not observed due to lack of access. After our structural, we moved to roofing. All the roofing components on all the buildings, including shingles, the low slope modified bitumen, sheet roofing, flashings, and other components were observed to be either UV damaged, unadhered due to age, or otherwise unable to provide their water shedding capabilities as they were designed. Those photographs can be found in pages 70, 71, and 72. All roofing materials should be removed and replaced. That would be on the main building, the classroom buildings, and the office building to the north. The roofing component conditions were found to be the direct cause of all the current interior leaks that are in turn the cause of the interior ceiling, wall, flooring, and flooring damages that we observed. Exterior walls, we found the exterior walls to be a mass masonry wall. That's a very strong and longevity type wall, had a terracotta substrate block. Other than very limited impact damages to the block that may be in need of repair for aesthetic purposes, the mortar lines and bricks themselves were observed to be in very good condition for their age. We found no stair-stepping cracks or anything like that in the exterior facade wall that would point to any foundation trouble. The exterior walls on the north classrooms and the office were a newer style brick cavity wall. These walls were observed to be in good condition as well, although there was a note that there was a lack of wall flashing at the roof line during the initial construction of the building that will either need to be provided with flashing or will need to have weeps provided at the bottom of that wall so it can evacuate water correctly. That water, again, is one of the causes of the metal framework deterioration and the tectum deck deterioration in those areas. The interior walls ranged from what looked like the original plaster on wood lath or furred out gypsum. The interior walls were not dismantled, but are assumed to have no insulating qualities. Mr. Wade with our MEP will get into that with the HVAC, but without insulation, it's going to be hard to properly equate the R value and run HVAC systems inside the building and keep humidity ranges at bay. Windows in the main building, they were surrounded with an application of sealant, which most was deteriorated. Sealant should stay pliable to keep the moisture out. Most were hard. A lot of the windows had been replaced from the originals, which had been utilized with wood bucking built to retrofit the newer windows into the older rough ends. There was lack of flashings and deteriorated wood in those wood bucks. The single window glazing panes are obviously not very efficient and again could cause a problem with interior humidity readings, providing moisture intrusion channels to the building's interior. The classrooms and office looked to be the original metal frame windows. Again, they had a single pane glass and they're puttied into their frames. That putty is something just like sealant that would be UV damaged, and it was very brittle. The majority of the glazing putty was cracked or missing, and the frames were corroded in many areas where they held water, where the glazing putty is cracked. It's recommended that the lumber bucks and the existing windows in the main building be removed and replaced, and that the metal frames in the offices and the classrooms be removed and replaced. During that replacement, we'd recommend a dual pane, more efficient window, and then the installation of flashings to prevent interior leakages. Our lead and asbestos, limited assessment was performed with both of those, just to get an idea if either one were present in the building. Both were found in random areas. That report goes into a very high detail from pages 40 to 67. So it is recommended that a full assessment of the entire buildings be performed on both lead and asbestos.
All right, now we'll get Wade to give a report from the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing.
Okay, my name is Wade Stewart, sub-consultant to Thompson Engineering and Watermark, and my specialty is mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, life safety systems such as that. Started off with the HVAC observations, and throughout the main building, the HVAC is limited to heating only with ceiling fans for cooling. Did see a limited amount of ventilation for exhaust only in each of the classrooms. The restrooms also have exhaust. I believe that it's apparent that they were under older codes, and the exhaust rate to meet today's codes will not be met. So a upgrade of the exhaust system will need to be installed. The ventilation, again, there is none outside of just exhaust and using the loose construction of the building. The heating system is through a recirculated boiler piping system, and the basement system seems to look in pretty good shape with the piping and insulation is still good. Pumps are in place, but without starting the system up and checking it out, it'd be hard to tell. So the heating is in classrooms and in corridors, and that's the main building. The gymnasium was upgraded with 2 large air handling units on each corner on the west side, north, west, and southwest. The cooling comes from a chiller that's installed outside, and it is, let's see here, it was, nameplate has 2006 on it, so it's fairly aged, but it's using R22 refrigerant, which is now outlawed. So the chiller itself would need to be replaced. The air handlers look to be in good shape, but without a dynamic test, I can't confirm that. Note that power was not on the building at the time of this inspection. Looking at the ductwork in the gym attic, the ductwork is metal. I cannot confirm the insulation level of that. I would have to assume that it does not meet code. And there are some flexible duct connections that connect to ceiling diffusers, and they look to be in poor shape. The chilled water piping passes through the basement, and the insulation on it is in pretty bad shape as well, inside and out. There's detached classrooms. They all had evidence of some wall-mounted P-TAC units, which is just a wall-mounted AC unit. And they were removed, it looks like by authorized people, and then just plywood covers put on. The feeders are left there in place. The office area in the middle of the place, it looked to have some split systems. There's evidence of some pad-mounted AC units outside, and as well as some gas at the building, I assume for heat. And so that's the HVAC portion. Now moving on to the electrical. The main electrical room, center of the main building, the panels really look to be in okay shape. The breakers are still readily available on the market, and and I'm sure the size of this electrical service was suitable for the configuration of this building's MEP system with the amount of gas heat and the boiler providing all the heat with no cooling. And so the electrical room seemed to be okay with the panels. The lighting throughout is all fluorescent and just surface mounted lighting. And that's really about the same case throughout the building, fluorescent lighting. Communications, there's evidence of some communication cabling going all through the building. I'm on page 14. You can see the condition of the main rack. Communication line coming into the building did not seem to be much at all. But in the condition of the cabling, I couldn't verify anything. There's some smaller little communication racks scattered out throughout the building. Again, they did not look to be in good shape. The fire alarm system, it looks like the coverage of all the field devices were code compliant, but just the condition of the main alarm panel at the entry, it's apparent this is just a hardwired system, and most of those are being outdated and upgraded to addressable systems. The electrical system on the detached classrooms, you can tell from photos on page 16 that they have been dismantled pretty good, and complete replacement will be necessary there. Same for the lighting and miscellaneous electrical. The receptacles, they're really sparingly in these rooms. You can see where they were surface mounted after the fact. And again, even though I do see some ceiling fans in these classrooms, I'm assuming that the PTACs did the bulk of the heating and cooling. Exterior lighting is in pretty bad shape as well. See, it's all HID technology, and I would recommend complete replacement of all lighting on the exterior. I'm sure some will probably need to be upgraded some to provide better lighting. And that's the electrical portion. Plumbing. The restrooms really looked in good shape. The fixtures look usable. Whether they are or not, I cannot tell you. You can see a single drinking fountain, page 19, figure 32. It's not on the wall. There's some general areas there where plumbing fixtures just need to be replaced. Here's an admin area sink. You see a water closet there. It may be okay. It's a flush valve operation, which means there's plenty of domestic water being delivered to the building. It's a janitor sink. And taking a look at the sanitary drain piping from our walkthrough in the basement, the piping looks like it's in okay shape. And I would say it could probably be reused, and then actually once everything's energized, a good and better assessment could be performed. In general, the MEP systems were lacking, and a considerable amount of work will need to be performed to bring this building up to code, to meet ventilation rates, lighting levels, while also adhering to current energy efficiency codes, which limits heavily the amount of lighting that you put into a space. If the HVAC system is considered to be upgraded to provide cooling throughout the building, the existing electrical service would not support that. Communications would definitely need to be applied some attention, and I really could not verify what the cost would be. Life safety for fire alarm, I would highly recommend upgrading that system. A newer system could use the existing wiring that's already in place, which is definitely a money-saving item, but all of the field devices in the panel would need to be replaced. That is pretty much summarizes my MEP report.
All right, thank you. Well, I guess from what you've heard, I guess the facility has good bones in essence. It's got a great structure. The heavy masonry walls that are mass walls, they're built in a time and era where there's good structural rigidity to those. The frames and the truss work in the main K1 center have good structural support and lifespan, with the exception of a few areas that have had some prolonged leaks that need some repairs. But overall, the structure itself seems to be intact and pretty good shape. A portion of our project was I guess a cost estimate, and a problem with that is there needs to be some type of program set or some kind of use or occupancy set in order to do that. Like both Bryce and Wade said, a lot of that stuff hinges upon whether you're going to use it for a school, whether you're going to use it for a business, whether you're going to use it for council chambers, whatever the city decides to do. That changes a lot of the use and the occupancy for the facility. And that dictates how many fixtures you're going to have for toilets, how much egress occupancy you need for the number of people inside the facility. It also is going to dictate how many people are allowed to even use the building. Obviously, if you've got a large open classroom, you got 30-something people in that room. If you've got an office complex, you're probably going to have a lot less occupants because you're going to use a 10 by 10, 12 by 12 office space, and you're going to have less occupants, right? So your HVAC tonnage is based off of your occupants as well, which also affects the insulation that you would want to put back into your walls. So as I said, the bones of the building are good, but your insulation, your windows, your HVAC, your electrical, your finishes, the restrooms, your ADA compliance, all of these things will need to be updated based on the new code system that's set up. And a lot of that hinges upon what you guys decide to use the facility for. But the good thing is you have a great bones to the system if you decide to reuse the structure as is. It's there. There's a lot of site conditions with the drainage in the way that it operates or doesn't operate the way that it needs to, that need to be addressed as well, and those are covered in the report as well. There's some conditions, I guess, as far as negative drainage instead of positive drainage into the building, and those are some conditions that are easily taken care of. But just letting you know, I think the biggest thing is you wanted to know what you got when you bought it, right? So knowing that you have a good structure initially helps out, and then building off of it from there once you decide a use is probably a good thing. There's some drawings at the back. There's 3 drawings. One is a roof plan that shows kind of the overall makeup and component of each individual structure and what those roofs are made of. There's a ground floor plan that talks about what the walls are. That's A100.1. That talks about what the ground floor walls and decking floor material is going to be made of, and then the same thing for the A100.2. Talks about the areas of the basement plan. So all of that information is in there for you to kind of help you when determining what you want to make the use and the occupancy of your new facility. Do you guys have any questions for us?
Questions, council?
Is there any next steps y'all would see that we should be taking before we start working on determining the end use, or does that need to be determined before taking the next step?
Actually, yes. Bryce, you want to handle that?
Yeah, it's really according to time frame. That's the biggest one. But to salvage, as Nick put it, the decent bones that the building has now, again, as I mentioned, almost all of the interior damages that we reported and that you'll see photographed and reported are due to roof leaks. So the roof is in dire need of replacement, and that is how you're going to salvage what you still have now.
Yeah.
That was all, well, it was predominantly asphalt shingles, right? And then
Correct.
so there was
Yes.
one, I saw one hole like a meteor went through the
Right.
roof.
That's
I don't know what that was.
No chimney flashing, so the
Yeah.
deck had
Yeah.
deteriorated there.
So those, we need to get on those things like
Yes, sir.
immediately, right?
Yes, and
That's
abutment of the low slope roof and the shingles, you can't see the low slope roof from the road, from the ground level. But on that south wing of the main building,
Where
where
they're
those
separated.
abut, they're
Yeah.
separated, you can stick your hand between them.
Yeah.
And that is where your truss damage is. So every time it rains, it's just pouring down into your attic. And
Yeah.
that goes through all floors, all the way down to your basement.
Yeah.
So it has caused subfloor damage that your tiles, VCT tiles are adhered to, so that subfloor is damaged as well. But the trusses at this point, I mean, the joists at this point are not on the lower level, so they can still be salvaged.
So it's kind of, council, kind of what I was hoping, at least, that the bones were good.
Yeah.
If we act soon and that the mechanical, electrical systems, not only dated, but in pretty bad shape, and lighting, and I thought we didn't, of course, you know, your cabling there, nobody expected that to be, you know, even when it's changed so much since the time they closed, even if it had been up to speed 10 years ago, it would be outdated
Still
now.
be obsolete per code.
Yeah.
So,
Is that, anybody else surprised? I was kind of pleasantly surprised by the report, possibly. Maybe even a little better than I thought. Anybody else have a similar thought, or?
I did not think it was way worse.
You thought it was going to be way worse?
You ready to say tear the thing down?
well, I think the vandalism makes it look a lot worse
That's true.
on the inside
Very
than
true.
it really is. So the fact that you guys have taken it and kind of kept it secure is going to help with the vandalism, and that's probably what makes it look worse, I think, on the inside than anything.
For sure.
What would you just, on the lead paint, I saw where you said there's some in some of the window casings, or some of the trim and things like that. It's still, not to make light of asbestos or lead, it still seemed to be fairly minimal from what your initial assessment was. Is that fair to say?
It did. Typically, lead paint is found due to color, because different pigments hold more lead than others, and the colors ranged all over the spectrum. So there was no real pattern to it, which is unfortunately why it would call for a full lead-based paint assessment for the entire building to find it all. But you would assume that if you found it on an interior window frame that looked original, then you would find it on all, but we did not. So that just goes to show that I believe some windows were prepped better during either restoration or during new painting or something to that effect, remodeling, than others were.
Right.
So,
And I know people, if you're watching or listening, that when you say the word asbestos, people tend to want to freak out. But you know, there's thousands of
There's a lot
buildings
of
out there
different
that it's in a stable condition, and it
Correct.
doesn't mean just because you have asbestos that it's not in a stable state. I was in a government facility, in fact, last week, and all over the place it was, you know, this building contains asbestos, but it's,
correct.
they wouldn't have us in there working if it wasn't
The
contained.
asbestos that was considered friable, which can become very easily airborne, all of that was in the attic, and that was insulation based around pipe. So it's not being disturbed right now. The asbestos in the actual basement and first floor levels were in the mastic and the VCT floor tiles. Probably more in the mastic than they were the tiles. The tiles were 12 by 12 inch, which is that's not typical for those to be positive. So more than likely in the original mastic that glued those to the floor, which obviously is not friable. That's very hard to produce it to be airborne, to disturb it. So.
Okay, good, good. Any more questions? Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very thorough report. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, good job.
guys.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay. Richard Johnson's going to come up and present a discussion on a drainage issue in the Cambridge Court subdivision. It says, and others.
And just as, thank you, Council President, Council, just as kind of a follow-up with Thompson and Watermark, you know, one of the things that we in Public Works are doing right now, one, we did get the fence secure completely around the perimeter of the K1 Center, so at least that's a first line of defense, even though there's a low picket fence in the front, so it's just a deterrent, as well as, you know, we're maintaining the grounds as far as mowing and keeping things trimmed. And we're trying to regularly go into the building to monitor the security of the windows and other penetrations that have in the past gotten knocked out to allow vandals to intrude. And the police have been really working with us to keep an eye on it during those times that it may be tempting to those to try to get in. And again, I think the biggest question I have for you is if there's an expectation that we need to be moving in a direction or doing something, please let us know, because we're kind of waiting with what's next. And I'll be glad to get proposals for a roofing replacement plan if that's what y'all like, so we can get it back before you and get some cost estimates. They put some numbers in the report on the actual replacement of the roof, but they qualified it. You have to fix some trusses and some other woodwork before you put a new roof on, so we can get that a little better defined as well if that's y'all's interest. So,
Well, while we're on that, I would like to hear from council on, you know, at least, you know, there was one hole, there was where that flashing is separated. I don't know if these things can be, I kind of looking at you two as the experts on this. You know, is that something that we can patch up before we go to a new roof? Or, I mean, some of those things were pretty obvious, though. I didn't.
Well, if the consensus is to save the building based on that report, we don't need to patch anything. We need to
Fix it.
start getting quotes on the roof.
I think what we need to do is to get a design as far as how we want to use the building. Say
Well-
design, but you may be able to just use the roof as it is, and then go ahead and start fixing the entire roof. Because that building's been leaking since, when I say since, we looked at it in 14, and it was leaking pretty heavily at that time.
Yeah, but as a non-builder, is there not sort of a quick fix patch that we could do in the short term so that we could figure out a long-term use without
Let's go with that.
getting heavily invested in the roof at this point in time?
Well, let me add to that too, because let's say that we decide to put a performing arts center there where the gymnasium is. Well, we don't want a brand new roof on the gymnasium, only to tear the whole roof out.
Correct, that's what I'm saying.
That's why
We need a plan as far as.
I guess that's a
We'd like to
question.
do
It's
with
a
the
good
roof
question.
before we fix the whole roof and then tear half of it out under new guys with a plan with.
There is a risk, I mean, by having an old brittle roof.
I mean, and I'm not saying, you know, patch it to use. I'm saying patch it just so that it doesn't continue to deteriorate the interior in the short term. I mean, I don't know, I mean, I'm not even that concerned about what it looks like, but just to prevent that moisture from continuing to pour in.
You can do patches, it's kind of, you fix what you see and then go back, check it, work on what you missed, and it's not quite working as what you thought out, but yeah, you can do patches.
I think if I heard them right on the roof,
You can- Like that hole he's talking about, you can put a new piece of plywood on it.
I mean, it sounded like the most
Patch that-
significant was
patch
that
that
hole
over,
and then where
and,
it's.
If they got any new, flashing around, it, put some
Separate, yeah.
flashing, then you have to put the, whatever roof, as far as shingles or whatever, roof substance you want to put on. But there's a lot of things you can do. It's a function.
Yeah, I mean, I just, you know,
Leaks are, they're tough.
well, it just
Just
depends
because it's
on.
dripping right there doesn't mean that's where the leak is. It could be way over there, coming down, it's just difficult.
Well, I mean, there were a couple of obvious sources of the leak based
Yeah.
on what we just heard.
Hole in the roof would be pretty simple,
Yeah,
it's leaking right there.
Even I might be able to figure that one
And the
out.
transition flashing from that low slope to the shingle roof.
The
Yeah,
separation-
that's,
the separation of
That's
the building.
separated, and that whole area is gonna be addressed, and that new flat, you're gonna put a new flat roof up there. It's gonna be one of those, where do you stop that transition of? And I'll say, you know, back to the old roof, I'll use this as an example. When Ivan hit over in Pensacola, my brother-in-law had a a 25-year-old roof. His neighbor had a 1-year-old roof. He lost every shingle. His neighbor didn't lose one. The shingle loses elasticity, pliability, and adhesiveness over a certain period of time. That asphalt dries up, and that's what's on that building now. So we'll be fine unless, you know, we get hit with a storm next summer and you lose all those shingles and the, you know, inside the building gets trashed because of water infiltrated. Then you kicking yourself. If you know you're gonna put a new roof on it.
I just don't, I know that we are, I just don't know the scope of the new roof, because you don't know what the design,
Yeah,
what it may be. So, just to give Richard some direction, what do
That
we?
building design, and you're looking at tearing maybe the gym ceiling out, don't do that area, do the rest of it.
Where was that, that place where that really low slope roof came down, it came down to that flashing?
There was the south wing.
And that is where the worst, in my recollection, of the water damage is coming
Is
through.
that something that is it more newer construction, or is that old structure?
I think the south wing is, well, parts of it was an extension at some point in time, but it appears, and I don't know if our guys from Thompson Watermark are still here, it sure does look like the south wing's roof is the worst of the worst, meaning it looks older or in worse condition than the rest of the roofs as you go to the north.
You know, I would, if I had to guess, I would say that main hallway in the north wing and the south wing would stay intact. Just the question is that center section.
And I'll be glad to see if we can get a proposal to do just, like you say, essential emergency repairs just to stop the water intrusion.
Let's at least get that for now.
Yeah, whatever you do can help. You'll slow down whatever it is. Everything's gonna fix it to a point. Again, you may have some little leaks that you have to address at a later date, but anything you do can stop, you know, basically make it simple terms, instead of 20 gallons coming in on a rain, you get 2 gallons coming in. And then work on that where you get 1 gallon, then you work on that till you get no gallons.
Do we agree on that? Go ahead and get him to look into that, at least a stopgap situation. Okay, let's go ahead with the campers court.
Very good, and let me just kind of give you just a quick bit of background. Our office received a call back in February of this year about some sinkholes that were related to a drainage pipe. And of course, we were glad to go out and investigate. And I sent the 2 affected property owners in Cambridge Court, at 10 and 12 Cambridge Court, the Browns and the Smiths, just my evaluation of what was found. Just to kind of tell you, and not to get too much in it, of course, Cambridge Court is a city-maintained right-of-way that is crossed by a reinforced concrete pipe. It has S-inlets on each side that picks up water that flows downhill from the high sides of both east and west in the neighborhood. At the right-of-way line, that pipe goes into a box and converts to a plastic pipe of the same size that then flows generally to the north to the development's retention pond, which sits between the houses owned by the Browns and the Smiths. The neighborhood was built in approximately 1994. The pipe is right at 25 years old, and there was a lot of issues with early HDPE plastic, and especially if it wasn't installed correctly. And this pipe is showing signs of systematic failure throughout the length of it, and it is what we refer to as sucking soil materials, meaning it's creating sinkholes above it through the ground in which it runs. I sent both Mr. Brown and Smith a letter telling them what I felt the problem was, and I did reinforce that the practice in our city is that subdivisions, the POAs are responsible for those drainage features that are outside the publicly accepted right-of-way, and I told them I would help in any way that I could help them successfully solve this problem. And I do know that the community has worked hard on solutions. The challenge here is that this is a designated easement, that this pipe lies in it, as well as the retention pond that travels between both the Browns and the Smiths lot. And it is not difficult work to do, but it's not inexpensive. The pipe is 48 inch. My recommendation is I would never replace again with plastic pipe. You go in and put concrete, and you know have a service life of 50 to 100 years, and that problem doesn't present itself again. And kind of left it at that. I ended up having a lot of contact with members of the community as well as the POA leadership, and the challenge that they have is they're a very, very small neighborhood. It's only 17 lots. That they realize it's their responsibility to take care of the problem, but the if this was a 125 lot neighborhood and you're dividing an expensive project up, it's not too painful. But in this case, when you only have 17, and their question, and you see their letter in your packet from the council president, was one, is this the type of work the city could do, and could they pay us to do the work at cost so that they're not getting something that they're responsible for covering. And again, my response is that I would be glad to at least present it to you as a council. I am very, very concerned about setting a precedent we don't want to live with, because we don't have unlimited capacity to be a contractor, and two, I am never a fan of the city competing against the private sector. We need to try to define that line. But the uniqueness of this situation, this is a very small neighborhood with a very big problem. That is not a difficult problem to solve today, but if it's left unsolved, there could be substantial property damage in the future if we have a series of exceedance events. Just so you know, this problem will not exist in the future, because every subdivision since I think 2011, or maybe a little earlier than that, we execute an O&M agreement. So there is a chain of responsibility that is defined by the original developer and his engineers, and that is a recorded document that explains who does what as we go forward in the future. We have regular inspections on a once every 4-year basis, and we make sure that they are doing their operation and maintenance of their drainage. Unfortunately, this subdivision was constructed before that time. Under our current subdivision rules, this arrangement could not exist today, because when we have a drainage way going bisecting property, we have minimum setbacks from where the lot should be, and this would be, kind of like if you think about Sedgefield, you see the big drain that runs through there, it's a big greenway. Well, that's what we require now. We don't think it's a good idea to have houses built up very close to a drainage way, and our current regulations require them to keep that open as common area and allow the drainage to have its natural path. I am not making any recommendation other than I can tell you this is work that we can perform. I put you a cost in there that covers materials, equipment, and labor. The labor rates are from the FEMA chart. That's what we use when we get reimbursed from the federal government from when we use our equipment, as well as the labor rate is the hourly plus overhead of a 1.51 multiplier. There are representatives of Cambridge Court here, and if you're willing to hear from them, again, if you choose to authorize this, my one recommendation would that we at least codify or at least acknowledge that there's a threshold which you will consider this, and that is any neighborhoods that are small, that have big drainage problems and predate any O&M agreements. That any approval from you would be subject of them paying up front, and that upon the completion and acceptance of the work that they would indemnify the city from any future claims or maintenance. So I'll be glad to answer any questions, and if you're willing to hear from some of the property owners, I'm sure they'd be willing to speak to you.
Council, I went out and visited the site yesterday afternoon with the association president, and I asked a lot of questions, and what it boiled down to for me was, what's the legality of the city going on to the property and using city labor to fix the problem. We've entered into public-private partnerships before, and every one of them are unique, and it's really, there's nothing exactly like this one. The most recent one that I can think of was the public-private partnership, where we had drainage going underneath the portico development on Fairhope Avenue where we entered into it. I believe we provided the pipe maybe, and they provided the labor to install the pipe through that property. It was similar in that it was draining water from the streets on Fairhope Avenue, and I think there's a similarity here. I talked to Councilman Brown today about this, and I talked to our city attorney about this as well. And so for me, it kind of came down to, it wasn't so much the size of the subdivision because, and I realize I live in a small subdivision as well, and sometimes we've had to pay 25 grand for a drainage pipe that blew out there, and we dealt with it, and we paid it. It's not so much how big or how small you are, because I think that big subdivisions can have big problems as well. So back to your point about setting a precedent, I worry that, okay, well, you can't just say we're not going to help big subdivisions because they have a lot of people paying dues. Nor do I necessarily agree with helping a small one just because they're small. People, when they move in there, say, look at that. But what I am looking at in the subdivision's defense is the drawing of the plat. And maybe, Mr. Johnson, you can help me out. I'm assuming that there's a lot of signatures on here, so this is the recorded plat. So I have to assume that Planning Commission and the City of Fairhope signed off on this site plan, or this, I guess it would be called the site plan, at some point in time back in the 90s. Is that pretty fair to say?
That's a correct statement.
And if you look at the language on the site plan, it does say drainage and utility easement. And I'm looking at you now, Jay, because you're an attorney. And when I see that drainage and utility easement, it to me does, at least to some degree, tie in the city. If it said it ended at that corner, I may have a different thought. If it ended at that culvert where the water drains into the street. And Marcus, feel free to jump in. Have you seen this plat?
No, Council President, I haven't. And my only thought would be, if the city accept that, and have we done any maintenance on it, and however long that's been in existence.
You want to come look at this? Can you come up? Will you come up and take a look at this? I don't want to put you on the spot, but to make a legal decision. But we'll put you on the spot anyway.
Let's do it.
That's what we do. Hand that to him. You see that right there? And show him where the problem is. So as they're looking at that, council, I guess what I'm trying to say is I think we have some responsibilities, and I think that because of that, maybe that plat, that we probably could enter into a public-private partnership and perform the work that Mr. Johnson's proposed.
As long as you get, if we've got some responsibility exposure, like necessarily talking about that, and I'm not saying we do, but if that is a dedicated easement through there for utilities and for drainage, and we can enter into a public-private partnership, that one would benefit the city because we've got that road right there that also would serve for drainage for the road. Is that correct, Richard?
That is correct.
Okay, then I think you're able to do that. As long as all that's been, we've got this thing properly platted and everything's dedicated correctly, I think we're okay. And if we hadn't dedicated it, then if we've been using it as a utility and or drainage easement over the years, then we've got some kind of prescriptive time frames that we can utilize and get into. So I think we can work it out.
Yeah, this was new. I didn't have this information when I spoke to you earlier today.
And this whole, the whole shaded area, Richard, that's the easement itself?
That is correct.
Okay. Just a spot answer, unless we dig up something else, but I think we can do that. And that's what we kind of talked about earlier.
So let me ask you this, council. If we ask the city attorney to look into this, and we can't take any action tonight anyway, but just looking forward to the next meeting, we could ask the clerk to put it on the agenda to enter into that public-private partnership and take care of it in a manner which Mr. Johnson's proposing, contingent upon our city attorney believing that it's legal to do so in this case.
Let me ask you, your concern is this private property?
Well, yes.
Yeah, that's not private property.
Well, that's the way I'm interpreting it as well.
No, when they do this, it's not private. That's a legal easement that they do not own. It's same as the easement in front of their yards, all the way to the street. It's all grass, looks real pretty, but that's not their property. It's a city easement. This would be construed as the easement, not so much as the city's necessarily, because it's a dedicated area in case there is damage or a problem, people can get on and work on it. Lot number 8 here, 9, whatever, 6 here, can't say you can't get on my property. You cannot do that, because that easement allows them to get on that.
Is it an easement owned
So
by
it's
the, is it an easement owned by the homeowners association and maintained by the homeowners
That would you have to
association?
look
Or, or is it an easement
Yeah,
that should be
I-
maintained by the city? And dare I say this, because there are probably, yeah,
I
come on.
wouldn't say it's maintained any more so than the front easement on the, your road easements.
Two different things. Easements are privately owned by the property owner. Right-of-ways are owned by the city. An easement is a part of that person's land, but we have legal right to
Yeah,
go
but you
in
can't keep you off
and be
of it.
able to put utilities or drainage if we need to. They cannot deny us access.
Yes.
But easements are privately owned, right-of-ways are publicly owned.
And maybe I can muddy the water, pardon the pun. When, I understand the historical, 25 years ago in this city's life is a long time ago, but there was an acceptance of the roads and right-of-ways and any utility easements applicable to the development of this. But it wasn't real well defined. But when you read the owner's dedication, it says hereby dedicate right-of-ways and easements, public or private as shown. Unfortunately, they don't put the word public or private anywhere, so you don't know what the actual intent is. Generally, in this case, if this was something that you felt inclined to move forward to as a double protection, and I'd get Marcus to be involved in it, we do something called a temporary right of entry and construction easement that then exists only for the time to make the repair. And then upon the repair's completion and acceptance by the POA, then that easement goes away. It's temporary. So and it would just mimic what's already been platted there, just as a good business practice to make sure that you have right of entry and easement there that would be signed off by the POA just as a backup of that. But it would be temporary in nature, meaning it would go away as soon as the work was complete and accepted, because I think how I have to look at this, and as I told the POA president, is that if you were to have hired a contractor to do this work, when he got through, he may have given you a warranty period, but at some point in time, he's done. He doesn't have to come back. It's back yours again. I would expect the same here, meaning that is upon completion and acceptance, then it transfers back to the POA, and they're responsible for any future maintenance and any indemnification.
Can we clean that up in this case then? We can?
Yeah, don't you think that's kind of a license agreement or something of that nature, correct? I mean,
Temporary license agreement, that's, ensuring we got a right of entry, not necessarily that we have an easement. And what I was asking about this piece of property is, if the easement, if anything, that was ever dedicated to the city and we undertook the duty to maintain it, or have we maintained it? I just don't know the answer to that. However, if it services the street area that we do have responsibility for and the drainage for the street, and we have an opportunity to cure some type of defect with that drainage, that's where you can enter into the public-private partnership and do some work with the input from the community or those property owners. And that's getting outside of what, we're talking about. If we own it or if we don't own it, you can still do it, but you have to have the public benefit with the private, agreement between the two parties, but there has to be the public benefit, that being the drainage in the street itself. And if that's an issue and we're maintaining that or improving that, then that's where we were able to do that. Well, you can't just go, if he's just got a sinkhole on his land due to a pipe that's busted and the city's not gaining anything, the city's not having any benefit to the streets itself, then we can't do it. We can't go on there.
I think you can make an argument that
a wholesale failure would jeopardize the
well,
street.
it's
so,
sinking there
yeah,
as well.
Yes.
I mean, the inlet is sinking into the street.
Yeah.
It's tilted forward and Looks like it's dropped several inches.
And if that outfall from the street fails completely, it would potentially come back and damage the street to a catastrophic level. So I mean, it has to be addressed. And that was my initial letter back in February, is it's not going to get better, it's just going to get worse. So, yes, there is, the benefit is it does protect something that is clearly ours to maintain and take care of, so.
And that's where we dealt with the project down here, was we improved the drainage for that whole area, street area, exponentially by supplying the pipe, the larger diameter pipe, and whatever you guys did downstream from there.
Absolutely.
So that was that public-private partnership that we entered into with that other entity. But it improved the city facilities and the city streets.
Richard, is this 80 feet that you have listed
Yes.
to replace?
Yes.
Is that from box to box, or is that just the damaged pipe, 80 feet?
That is the entirety of the plastic pipe that goes from
Okay.
there's a junction box that goes from concrete to plastic. So from that junction box to the head wall of the pond is 80 feet.
Okay, and that's all the plastic that there is?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
And it's not terribly deep, thank goodness, so.
So, the council, I recommend we try to get a firm answer from the attorney, and if the answer is that we could enter into that public-private partnership with some sunset clause in there, then we could move forward with Mr. Johnson's recommendations to have the city, like you said, it is something that we can do to take care of it.
I'm gonna muddy the water a little bit.
Go ahead.
Excuse me, muddy the water a little bit more myself.
All right.
Obviously, the city, when they recorded this, wanted that easement to maintain the drainage pipe, right? Would there be another reason
Yeah,
for
I
that
mean,
easement?
yeah, that is the drainage way for, that's picking up all the way up Gayfer, or Atlanta, excuse me. And that all that eventually flows down to Fly Creek through there. So, yeah, that's a major drainage way.
I'm probably gonna go against some belief here, but I believe that's city pipe. If that water's coming off a city-approved street, a city-accepted street, and the city put in an easement to maintain a pipe carrying the water off the city street, then that pipe needs to be replaced by the city.
Well, and I think we've got to look at the precedent that we have. I mean, and that is that our maintenance has always historically ended at the right-of-way line, and we've been pretty consistent in that application. And the good news is that all new development has codified that in an agreement, so it's not even subject for debate. I think the compromise here is that we can give a better value, but
How is that handled in new development, just to help me understand?
Well, when a new development is finalizing to become in for a final plat, so it's getting ready to have lots it can sell. The engineer of record defines the public infrastructure and defines the private, and that's where the right-of-way line ends. And then he develops what we call an operation and maintenance plan, okay? And it talks about what the responsibility for what kind of annual maintenance and every 4-year maintenance and what the future owners have to take on. The developer has to record that operation and maintenance plan as part of the recordation of the final plat. And then that is conveyed. So when the POA is established, that's one of their establishing documents. These are your rules of the road. Here's what you're responsible for. So there's none of this, well, we didn't know. And it lays it out very good. And one of the requirements is that it's got to be inspected by a design professional once every 5 years, and there's a checklist of things to inspect and the condition of, and is it working as designed, as built, and it's worked quite well. And the good news about that plan is it's forcing POAs to be a little bit more preventative maintenance minded that prevents the bigger issues in the future. So that problem theoretically will not recur in the future because now it's codified. There is a contractual agreement that says here's the city's responsibilities, here's the property owner's responsibilities.
And back to that though, into what Eric's comments was that it says utility, drainage and utility easement. It doesn't say whose easement. It could be the subdivision's easement. So as he said, as a compromise solution to keep from dare I say, litigating something like this and having the expense of that, you reach a compromise solution, because not really clear, it could very well be the subdivision's utility and drainage easement, which just says the subdivision has the right to go on that property and maintain it, maybe not the city. Is that about right, Eric?
Yes, sir. Typically, as Richard said, that's not something we have done, and one of the things to keep in mind is under the new regulations, well, under current subdivision rules, you will have utility and drainage easements on all corners of every lot throughout that subdivision. They're put there if they're needed. 9 times out of 10, there's nothing there. They don't have anything underground, but they are there if they're needed. So think about that as you're deciding whether or not, how we're going to accept those easements, because there are going to be easements on every single property line.
Yeah, that's kind of why I was recommending that what Richard was, I kind of emphasized that as a compromise solution to it, I thought. Is Jay here? Not you. Oh, hey, Jay, can you come up for a moment? And I have the advantage of having spoken to, yes, sir. I have the advantage of having spoken to Jay about this yesterday. So if we reach the compromise solution, what's the consensus of your subdivision? Are you happy with that?
Yeah, absolutely. We had the meeting, we've had so many neighborhood meetings, but, the final one after we got Richard's proposal was, we're going to assess each property owner to, pay for the full repair as he outlined it, and it was voted in unanimously. So, yeah, we're prepared to do that.
So contingent upon, back to, Robert, are you okay with that? Yeah. So back to having the city attorney just bless that. We can get that on the agenda. You have the estimates in there.
Yes, sir.
Correct?
And I will get with Marcus as soon tomorrow, and we'll get it hammered out.
It's $16,000 or $18,000.
Yes, it's a little under 18, I think, was the, what I had seen.
What it was.
17,499.92.
All right,
Thank
thanks.
you, Jay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. All right, council, while we got just a few moments. Thank you, Marcus. Let's jump into the budget real quick. Sure. Jimmy? So just want to say that I think we're very, very close to adopting the budget, council. I believe that the utilities could probably be adopted any day as they are. We could probably adopt those. The questions that I know of that remain outstanding was there still at least one council member that I know that's a little bit concerned with No, I don't. No, we're going to talk about this for 10 minutes.
All right.
So it's down to, I believe there's still a little bit of question about expenditures in the general fund. We need to, and I think we need to have this discussion tonight, discuss raises and come to an agreement on that, raises for the employees. And then also, the last thing would be, I want to have a little bit of a discussion about capital projects. So let me tackle the raises. I think that may be fairly easy. Last year, we came up with a hybrid way to give raises, and I believe we had said that there would be an across-the-board raise of 2%. Jill, help me out with this. 2% for everyone, and then 1% of each department's budget would go into a pot of money, and the directors/supervisors would divvy up the 1% for merit raises. Huh?
Is it half and half?
Was it 1.5, 1.5? Was it not? I believe it may have been different. I believe it was actually different for salary and non-salary personnel.
Yeah, maybe so.
And so what I was going to propose, quite simply, was the same as we did last year, that hybrid method. It seems to be, I think, fair. People may not be happy with their merit raises, I don't know. We leave that up to the individual supervisors and directors to come up with who's performing. That's performance-based. But at least if by doing the hybrid method, everybody still gets a raise. And so I would just suggest that we keep it the same as we did it last year. And that was also recommended to us by some members of the former Economic Advisory Committee that we had. Anybody else have a suggestion on that?
Part-timers were not included last year, and I know this year we budgeted 1.5% for regular full-time, not seasonal or anything like that. I'm just making sure to ask what y'all want to do with the regular part-time people.
That's a great question.
What was the initial proposal for, in general, for salary?
For the 3%, 3%. 3% for full-time and then 1.5% for regular part-time,
Non-seasonal.
non-seasonal.
And
Yeah.
3%, was that,
That was full-time.
and didn't have a
It was
split?
fully performance-based merit.
Do we believe that our part-time, that's a good question.
I would say just make the part-time eligible for the merit raises only. When they have the ability to get a raise if they want.
See
Anybody
what you're
else?
saying? Instead of everybody getting something, you're just saying, just make it performance-based for the part-timers.
Correct, for merit raises. I'm just a suggestion. Well, you do have the ability to obtain a raise.
I think at what, 1.5%?
Mm-hmm.
I could agree to that.
So, just so I'm
Kevin had his Wheaties today.
so you're thinking about doing 1.5 across the board for regular full-time employees, another 1.5 into a merit-based for regular full-time employees, and then another 1.5 merit-based for part-time, year-round employees?
You know what I think it was? I think it was 1.5, and I think that was for salary personnel. It was, it was 2 and 1 for hourly, and it was 1.5 and 1.5 for salary, is what it was. So I would suggest that we go for the part-time, the 1.5, just merit-based. That's what it was.
You said 2 and 1 for the hourly, right? And then 1.5 for the salary.
Right. That's right. That's exactly what it was.
All the years run together to me.
I know. That's not, let's just say that's a starting point. You still got time. We're not voting on that tonight. But so if you want to tweak it, think about it. That's a starting point for discussion. I think that I thought it was a good one.
And I think we ran into this last year. If you are capped out, maxed out at your salary, how does that impact you? Does this raise it enough for you to receive something, or are you not in that position unless
Well, we
additional
increased
action?
the bracket last year by 6%, so I think it's taking care of a
For
lot of
this
that.
year,
Yeah.
If you max out, you max out. No,
Yeah.
according to how we did it, because we did have the personnel board look at that, and they made the recommendations to move those to the right. As far as, I can't seem to find the paperwork on the capital improvements budget.
Your capital projects fund,
Yeah,
Jack,
you have
or?
that in this package that you gave
Yes,
us.
let me get a packet. I got my paper copy over here. So,
It's the
I
lead-
forgot to
it's the lead
page
one,
number
larger than
these,
lead one.
but, if you go about midway through the packet, you'll see capital projects.
Is it after that general fund?
Yes, it's after gas tax. And
What you just gave us?
yes,
You made me think of something, Jill. Did you leave in that additional lodging tax based on a higher rate? That was like 87,500.
Yeah.
Did you leave that in there?
let's see, lodging tax. Yeah, I left in the 25,000 and the $98,000 increase that we discussed from the previous meeting.
I didn't hear a consensus that we were going to actually vote to raise the lodging tax. Without having a vote to raise the lodging tax, I'm real reluctant to put additional revenues in the budget.
Right.
I mean, we can always come back and adjust the budget, but I don't think we should have revenue in there for something that doesn't exist. All right, council, that's, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 pages from the end. Maybe 7 pages. I wanted to give you guys another chance to look back over these capital projects. How do you propose, I was noticing that there's a loss, how do you propose to make up the $1.65 million deficit in the capital
I
projects?
think there's 1.9 in there today.
It's a little lower than that, but what this looked like is we had enough cash
Mm-hmm.
to cover that. So in the previous years, the sales tax calculation, that y'all had a quarter of the sales tax revenue have been going into that over several years. So it created excess cash in that fund. And with these projects and the cash balance that we have now.
Oh, it's cash balance then from that?
Right.
Yes.
It's just built up from
Oh, that's
y'all
good.
transferring that money over there.
Okay. And then the other question I had in relation to that was the transfers from impact fee fund. In there, Jill,
Uh-huh.
there's proposed 1.336 million, okay? On tonight's agenda, we have proposed to use some impact fees to pay for the rec land. Help me out, Kim, that's 800 and something thousand dollars. Do we have enough in that balance? But before you answer that, and everybody gets worried about that, we could have taken the money from another fund to pay for that rec land, but we decided that it would be best to use the money in impact fees because that's earmarked for that, and we know that we can use it for that. And that other money, this other fund that money sits in is not attached to anything. We could use it, so we could, it was 6 and 1/2 dozen of the other, but we felt it wise to use the impact fee money for
Timeline on the
something.
impact fee.
Timeline on the
Yeah,
impact fee
and
money.
it is not reflected in this, but
It's not,
that was
okay.
waiting on,
So
you know,
that
a
1
decision
point, so
from-
Jill, so that 1.336, if we're using money out of impact fees, 800,000, it show, that's gonna come up light, okay? So we could use the money that was in that other fund.
But that represents, the number that you're seeing, 1.3, that represents police, well, not necessarily police, but that is gonna be your road,
Yeah.
transportation impact fees and parks fees. So you have to go back to look at your impact fee, sheet, and it'll break down.
It's right
the
after
total.
capital
So look at the
project.
next page.
Okay. Anyway, that's what I'm trying to do is resolve that. It may be a perceived deficiency, I wasn't sure.
So 550 is in the right.
500 under transportation is part of that 1.3. The second line in transportation is part of it. The 150 under rec is part of it. The ADA platform is part of it. The pickleball courts are part of it. I think that's it.
And And that other fund didn't have any kind of earmark or anything associated with it?
No.
Because one thing that I know we don't have in here, and I know there's been some discussion about it, we're not gonna have probably plans in place to move forward with anything major, but there's nothing currently planned to spend on the K-1 Center, and even though we may not have a plan to proceed with something definitive this next budget cycle, we're certainly going to need to spend some money either on some repairs or on some planning, additional engineering, architecture. I mean, we're going to have to move forward on that with something, so we need to be aware that budget's either going to have to be amended or we're going to have to pull that money from somewhere.
Well, here's one thing that I looked at on that, Councilman Conyers, was the 300,000 proposed for the Welcome Center?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'd really like to see that improvement made. Do we have to go with that option to spend the 300,000 on that? We could, I think there was an option there that was closer to 100,000. And I would kind of push for that option and free up some money for that K-1 Center.
Okay.
That'd be my suggestion. So basically, council, that's kind of what we're down to, the nuts and bolts and why we're not quite ready to pass it yet. You know, I know we're getting browbeat over it, but, you know, there's just a few little details that we lack.
Jake, did y'all ever approve the community development portion of the budget? Did I?
I don't think we have yet. I think that there's
Yeah, I
some
didn't
pressing
think so.
needs for that to maybe move forward soon.
I know we've been getting green sheets and y'all been approving them, and on the green sheet it says in the fiscal year 2020 budget, but I know by now y'all usually looked into that.
We looked at it, we edited it all, and you should have
Yeah.
captured all those edits. One
Yeah, I
thing
did.
that I was going to suggest, and we're probably going to have to wrap up here, is that if council was willing, we could call a special meeting for maybe, I don't know what day of the week would be best. Friday's not going to be a good day, probably, but maybe Thursday. And we could have a little bit of a work session to talk about maybe the general fund. And we may pass some portions of it, and we might could pass the utility budgets as well. What do y'all think about that? Would Thursday work for you guys?
What time Thursday?
Make sure I'm not conflicting with something going on in the city Thursday. Is there any big events going on or anything going on here?
Oh, Halloween.
Oh, Thursday's Halloween?
Never mind.
Well, what if we had it at noon? What if we had a noon meeting?
I can't make that, but
Can you make it 3 o'clock?
I could probably maybe make 3 o'clock.
I mean, we're talking less than an hour meeting.
Yeah.
Jay,
Should be able to.
would 4 be better? You gotta get your kiddies ready.
I think my daughter has a late appointment on Thursday. I mean, but it's late, it's like 4 or something.
How about 3?
I can make 3 work.
Let's try to do that.
Okay.
Let's see what we can get done between now and then. We'll get real close.
I got a quick question. I don't know who it would be for. Jill, I have on my notes. You got questions?
I was gonna just ask, I've got a group that might be able to come in just a minute or two, do a presentation after we start the actual council meeting. I just want to know if we could possibly slide them in when we would have normally done the mayor's comment.
Is that tonight? When is this?
Tonight.
Tonight?
Yeah. If we-
Yeah, do it on your comments. Do it on your comments.
Okay. Perfect.
Jill, at one of our meetings, the capital project for that resurfacing was scratched from 800 to 500. I don't think that was by me. Was that
I don't recall.
Richard Johnson, I think, might have.
I don't recall that, but I mean, if it needs to be 500, that's perfectly great.
The reason you're seeing that 800 is a rollover. Because we just put out for a bid for what y'all approved for 19's budget, and so we just rolled that over, and all the resurfacing is in fact phase funding.
Okay, so is that what's accounted for on that impact fee sheet behind, okay,
I think there was there 300 that rolled over?
yeah.
Okay.
So it was 5 and 300 rolled over.
300 rolled over, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Department heads, does anybody have something just you really got to tell us tonight? You got a minute or two.
You know, one thing, I got rebuild plans for Ben's Barbecue, so folks can put out.
Want to do it this time? He's got rebuilt.
Okay, any other department heads, real quick? I got another minute.
Real quick, just a quick update on the green overlay. We will, just some of the delays that, and a big meeting we had, I think a few of you were there, and concerns with that was brought up by property owners along Greeno. And the request that they made is to kind of tap the brakes on that a little bit and listen to some of those. We've been having those conversations, but with the holidays and the scheduling, there will be a need to extend the moratorium if we're going to continue that. So next week, next council meeting, we'll bring that to you. Okay. If you have any questions,
Any
we're
questions?
here to answer that here or later.
December? Yes. Okay. All right. Great. Thank you. Let's go ahead and adjourn.